Alrighty, yesterday got the 19 tore down. I was going to wait and do the 1600 first, but the more I got to thinking about it, the more I was like, well, I really don't want a dead tractor sitting around, so at least the 1600 will still run and move. This one I wanted to get done and over with, so I ended up doing it first instead. And did get some good news, and I'm glad I did it first, because it's not going to take that long to fix. Well, there's really no bad news, so let's go from the top to bottom on the good news. It's got new pistons, and they must have re-ringed it at some point not too long ago, because it's got fresh hone marks in the sleeves, and there's some carbon in the sleeves, but there's no ridge, so it hasn't got too many hours on that ring job. Pistons all look good. There's a little bit of carbon in them I'm going to clean up. The problem was the head gasket, and basically what happened was the head bolts in this thing, I gotta look the exact spec up, but the outsides are like 150, 180 something pounds, somewhere in that range for the outside four, because you don't want to bust the head. But then all the inside the 12 inside head bolts are like 250 pounds. And I busted them all loose with a 1/2 inch impact gun. That gun shouldn't even have touched them. So we know this motor's obviously been apart before. And so apparently when you torque the head bolts on these motors, it's a two-step process. First off, you oil the threads, not grease, no anti-seize, actual like 30 weight motor oil. You oil the threads, run them in up to torque, put your valve train back together, put the tappet cover back on, run the motor, get the motor hot, and what that does is the block and the head get hot and they expand and actually crush the gasket even more. Then you let it sit, let the motor cool back down all the way, and then you go through and torque it again, and you usually get at least a 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn again before you bring it back up to torque. You should do that on every motor, but especially on these 310s, you have to do that unless you want to pop a head gasket. My guess is, one, there was no lubrication on the bolts, so they torqued them dry. Terrible idea, because you get a false torque. And two, I'll bet they only did a cold torque on it. And it was so loose. First, they didn't use any type of sealer on the gasket either, because the head gasket came off in one piece. It wasn't even stuck to the head, and it wasn't stuck to the block. It was just sitting there. And when I got all the bolts loose in the head, I went to lay the impact on the bench, and I started hearing something pissing out on the ground, and I turned around and like, what the hell? Antifreeze is running off the back of the block down onto the ground. So this had never been sealed up back here. And I saw that, and then the next thing I did was I went up and grabbed the turbo elbow and started going like this, and I was rocking the head. If they did everything right and used the right gasket sealer and everything, you shouldn't even be able to touch popping that head off without at least a pry bar, if not a porta power. So basically, I'm lucky it didn't pop between cylinders, or it didn't pop between. A lot of times what'll happen is it'll pop between number 6 and one of these coolant ports, and it'll blow the radiator. That's what happened on my 1955 the first time it popped a head gasket, or the time it popped a head gasket, which led to the whole engine rebuild. But different tractor, different story. What this one did, thank God, is all it did was right here. I don't know if you should be able to see it. You're not hearing the light. This hole is for one of rocker arms, and there was a almost like a silicone style or silicone O-ring with a steel backup ring in it in this hole. And you can see how much there's not a whole lot of meat in between this hole and this hole's a coolant port. And basically what it did was it blew out right there. And it had eroded the whole gasket. The only thing left in that hole is a little bit of the steel backer. So that right there is where the problem was, and that's why it would overpressure the radiator, but it wouldn't pop the radiator cap. Is because it actually wasn't getting compression pressure, it was getting crankcase pressure. So, and this is also an early style 310 head gasket. The updated 310 head gasket, which is no longer available, the fire rings are copper and they're swedged into the gasket, and all of these rings are copper and they're swedged into the gasket. They're not these crappy chintzy silicone ones. So that's good news. That means the head's not warped anything. It's all good. The only thing we have to check before we put it back together is I got to get the head cleaned up and I got to get the block deck cleaned up. And we're going to check sleeve protrusion and we're going to check valve protrusion just to make sure it's within spec. Right now it feels good because the liners are above the deck. So you can feel it just by running your finger over it. So the sleeve protrusion should be good, and the valves are all good, all even, so valve protrusion should be good. And it wasn't that bad of a deal start to finish. It only took me, I was working by myself, it only took me about a little over 2 hours, which we went from when I started draining the coolant down to when I was pulling the head. And that was with a stop in between to take a phone call, so not too bad of a deal. The inside of the tappet cover is nasty. It was definitely steaming that coolant off. It's actually settled a little bit. Yesterday when it was fresh, it was really nasty. And I want to shoot the son of a bitch that did the overhaul on this thing. I mean, that silicone everywhere. They gobbed so much silicone on that tappet cover gasket. When they stuck it on, they got silicone on the rocker arm. Dumb son of a bitch. And then they siliconed all the holes where the studs go through that hold the rocker arms and then hold the tappet cover on. So the threads were all gob full of silicone. I had to pick that off before I could even run the nuts off to get the rocker arms off. They had silicone gobbed on the crankcase breather, which that doesn't even need to be sealed. It's just a crankcase breather. And there was even evidence that they had put a thin layer of silicone on the head gasket, which is probably didn't help the situation then. I hate stupid people. Some people should just not be allowed to turn wrenches. But anyway, all that is good news. I got the head gasket all ready to go, but I did call today because I figured while I got it apart, I'm going to go through and put new valve seals on it, because the motor, and it holds good oil pressure. There's no reason to tear the motor down anytime soon, so I figured while I got it this far, put valve seals in it so I know that those won't leak. So, yep. That's pretty much an update on where this is at. Today's pretty much just going to consist of cleaning up the block in the head deck and cleaning up the rocker arm assembly and the tappet cover and checking tolerances and getting everything set to go, because my parts should be here tomorrow, and hopefully by tomorrow night it'll be running again. Because, and all you guys are going to be ecstatic about this, the phone call I took yesterday was the guy that I helped bale hay for, and he wants to run 2 balers again. So, if this thing is running, I kind of want to run the baler on this. So, I know it'll be back together by Thursday, no problem. I'd like to have it back together tomorrow so I can tear into the 1600 on Thursday. But, so now everybody can quit bugging me about making hay. So, and just to answer all the questions, I do not have any of my own hay and do not plan on putting any of my own hay in anytime soon until I actually have enough ground that I can afford to take some ground out of row crop rotation and put it into hay. So, you'll only probably see baling videos, and even those are going to be intermittent because it's going to be whenever old Steve wants to run 2 balers. So, but anywho, that's an update on the 1950. So, I guess get to work on getting this thing cleaned up. Shouldn't take too long, shouldn't be too terrible. Probably take a ridge reamer and knock that carbon off of there, and vacuum out the pistons, and probably take a wire brush and knock a little bit of that carbon off the tops of the pistons. Maybe, I don't know. Probably should. But anyway, I guess that does it for this one, and hopefully we will catch you guys either tomorrow or Thursday with a running tractor. So we'll catch y'all on the next one.